As we've had our birthday party, we've invited both the In the Mirror group, and that means all of us NTL members, all of us kids, the NTL members. And we also have our Out the Window communities, bringing new information and new insights into who we are as NTL, what others see us kids as NTL applied behavioral scientists and very important people in the world. And we've talked about our writing, we've talked about our T group experiences, we've talked about our human interaction experiences. We've actually been around the world. And so we're coming back now to First Nations and women and men who have been stewards of the land that we call, in one culture, Great Turtle Island for many, many years. It's my pleasure and indeed my honor to be the person who's interviewing. I did interview, but to be the person who's introducing Norbert Hill and Cynthia Ruiz. I'll first introduce Nor. I get nervous every time I do this because I want to get it right, because I love the folks I've been gifted to introduce. I've known Norbert Hill for over 30 years, and I have had the amazing experience of learning from him, of learning about his history, and witnessing how he lives his values. And I don't say that about anyone, and I don't say it about everyone. But if you read his bio, then you'll see who he is. I'm not going to take a lot of time talking about that, but the one thing I do know is that he has never left the land. And for me, that is the thing that guides me. Never leave the land. We've heard people over the last 3 days talking about staying true to the community. We've talked about the Ken Benny scholars. We've talked about our founding roots around paying attention to community and how we create opportunities for social justice. We've even called each other out on, well, wait a minute, are you putting the onus on the people who are impacted? Or wait a minute, who should be doing this? Okay, wait a minute, how is this going? So there's wonderful stuff in our conversation. So if we want an example of how we stay grounded and speak for the people who oftentimes don't have a voice to speak for themselves, our next two presenters live that on a daily basis. And that is Norbert Hill and Cynthia Ruiz. So I'll introduce Norbert and then I'll come back and honor Sister Cynthia as well. Norbert.
Oh, am I on now?
Yeah, you're on.
Well, thank you. As Kathy says, my name is Norbert Hill. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, and I'm a member of the Turtle Clan. I'm invited, I'm humbled and honored to be invited to this 75th Jubilee celebration. And I especially thank Kathy for inviting me. It's been a wonderful refresher of learning more about Kurt Lewin and Ed Schein and Tavistock and T groups and individual and macro change. I earned a master's degree in 1970 in counseling, but I was quite aware of NTL. Happy birthday, NTL. I see NTL as a verb, not a noun. It's an action-oriented verb. The problem with Western thinking is that they always think they're right, not different. And if I try to apply Native American applications to Lewin's thinking and others, I agree with Ed Schein that education is the key. I feel that America may choose to die stupid. Intervention is needed yesterday. Many years ago, Charlie Seashore offered me an opportunity for him to be a mentor to me, and sadly, I didn't take him up on it. But I've been engaged with people like Kathy and Richard Orange and John Savage and others to do the work. I always like when they say the work. It's never applied in any other place, but the work is internal as well as external. In my first interview with a higher education institution, I was asked this question: why are you an Indian? And I think, oh my God, this is, nobody's ever asked me that question. So my response was, it came with the body. Why? And I really wanted to jump across the table and say, why are you a white man? And, you know, I never knew how much of an Indian I was until I moved off the reservation. At home, I'm just one of the guys. And I don't need to justify or defend myself, who I am. I have lived a life with a foot in two canoes, the Indian canoe and the white canoe, and sometimes not very good in either one of them. But being an Indian is a process, not an event. The work has helped me to navigate without tipping over my canoe. My grandmother was a Mohawk orphan born in 1876. And that was the year that Custer met Crazy Horse, that little bighorn. She graduated from medical school in 1899. My grandmother said, going to school and getting an education are two different things, and they don't always happen at the same time. I have consulted in diversity and equity issues matters for the past 50 years, doing the work. Nothing much has changed. I'm having the same conversations with folks I had 50 years ago with just different people. Some are sympathetic and others are indifferent. And I think indifference is a choice people make. I've worked on a white playground for over 50 years. I don't have keys to the gate and I don't hand out the equipment. But by necessity, I know how to navigate the playground better than most. In part, NTL gave me a map to navigate the playground. Now we're dealing with issues of cancel culture. In my view, the country is going backwards. You know, I've worked for inclusion and not centering our identity. You know, with the work, I can't fight the white man and the Indians at the same time. So I'm working about social justice, internalized oppression, historical trauma, missing Indian women, suicide, drug and alcohol issues, internal to my life. So unless we get better in our own communities, we can't reach out to the other communities. So I've decided, you know, with my remaining time to work with my own people. We're all trying to find our voice, from the oldest to the youngest. I think separate groups are good, but I think it's intergenerational. So I think it's and both. And I'm thinking in terms of the American Indian community, nobody's going to save us but us. In 2018, I co-authored an anthology called The Great Vanishing Act, Blood Quantum, and the Future of Native Nations. We sold over 3,000 books. You can find it on Amazon, your resource room, Barnes and Noble. But the seed for the book was born 50 years ago with the question, why are you an Indian? A great question, an intimate question, but not a job interview question. There are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and there are over 400 tribes that deal with the blood quantum issue. In many cases, 25% blood is the marker to be a citizen in enrolled in any tribe. Are we members of a club that is entitled us for benefits, or are we citizens of a nation? We didn't have to deal with the one drop rule. If you're citizens of a nation, what is the responsibility? This is a really complicated question, and not enough time to deal with that issue here. But long story short, in 1862, the federal government figured out a way to terminate Indians, to get rid of the Indian problem. Indians have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, but it's going to take a lot of internal work to get that, especially in the face of cancel culture. Since 1492, the mainstream has been trying to cancel Indians since. So this will be the most important issue Indians will face this century. Blood quantum is not sustainable over time, and it's unfinished business. It's a question of our survival. So Indians are not a minority group. Indians have land, Indians have treaties. Indian tribes are not 501c3 nonprofit organizations. I remind my friends that Indians lost over 2 billion acres of land. In 1832, Chief Justice John Marshall termed Indian tribes as domestic dependent nations. And now they're chipping away at our limited sovereignty. You know, oftentimes in the United States, Indians are seen as a minority among minorities because of our numbers. And so we don't always have a place at the table. Many of you may remember your first classroom. Your first classroom was the kitchen table. And I learned that Indians discovered Columbus in 1492, and the Vikings landed many years before. Balboa didn't discover the Pacific Ocean when Indians were living in California thousands of years before. There are over 200 medicines in modern pharmacology that come from Indian country, Indian medicine men. We knew with 2 teas taken in sequence provided birth control. We knew the inside bark of a willow tree had the same chemical properties as an aspirin before Columbus. Before 1492, Indians had communities larger than the city of London, the mound builders near St. Louis. The Pueblo in 1680 is my favorite stories. Indians killed 400 Spaniards, including priests, and sent 2,000 Spaniards back to Mexico. Abraham Lincoln ordered the mass execution of 38 Indians in 1862, 150 years ago, the largest execution in US history. The Indians were just taking food that was promised to them in a treaty. Lincoln never executed Confederate officials or generals. Democracy thrived in Indian country centuries before Indians discovered Columbus. Indians are known as the Romans of the West. Franklin and Jefferson studied the governments of the Iroquois Confederacy. And they said, how could such ignorant savages have come up with a system of democracy? There's a lot to learn there. In 1924, my father became a citizen of the United States. He was 12 years old. I learned American civics like all the rest of you, and democracy, the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance, the forms of government, how we elect, how we make decisions. But I also learned the traditional Native American Oneida civics. And I have to learn both. I have to know both to be able to navigate. You know, the tradition of adoption was prevalent in Indian communities. We took in runaway slaves and gave them a safe place to live and a role in the community. There are Black Indians. The Spaniards came to Mexico and South America, and they didn't bring any women. So they married Indian women, and they created a new society, especially in Mexico. The Mexicans were born because they had children with Indian women. The Buffalo Soldiers are celebrated in the Black community, and they were good soldiers. But for Indians, they were hard to fight because they were tough, you know, but they were doing the bidding of the white man, the power structure to kill another minority. And we've never talked about it. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done with that particular issue. We tried to get along. We were exterminated. We lost 2 billion acres of land. So my question is, who is a savage? That was the kitchen table curriculum. I had the honor of being the chairman of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. And we celebrate the past, the present, and the future at the same time. So to gestalt, we do it, it's one sentence, past, present, and future. The National Museum is not about dead Indians. Indians are not artifacts. We're celebrating living and breathing cultures. And some people ask me sometimes, how long will Indians last? And I say, till the last song is sung. So I see young people sitting around the drum singing songs that powwows across the country, and I see hope. In closing, let me just share a few things that I've learned from my elders, my teachers, my mentors. And I see NTL and its history full of teachers and mentors and elders. But I'll close with, I learned this around the campfire. Tears are the highest form of prayer. Laughter is the sweet medicine. The unseen world and the seen world are different. It's gestalt, it's spiritual, intuitive, and psychic. Dream analysis predated Freud hundreds of years and more complex. The longest distance you'll ever take in your life is the distance between your head and your heart. And if you're going to be a leader, you got to make that journey back from your heart to your head. Elders have told me, he says, when you graduate from college, it's not so much what your head knows, what does your heart know? Thanksgiving is every day, not just the last Thursday in November. You have a tradition of adoption in many, many ways, and with ceremony and inclusion. We talk about the new normal. I want the old normal. It seems to me that makes better sense than what we're trying to do now. So I wanted to share some perspective of looking back and moving forward at the same time. I think Indians have a lot to teach America. So I want to thank you. Thank you for honoring me to be able to speak at NTL in this Jubilee celebration. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Norman. I honor you, and I will continue to title you with Chief. I know that you don't, and I recognize that. But of all the years, how much you teach us still lives in that title. Thank you so much. And one of the things that we know from many cultures, and particularly many traditional cultures, is a phrase that I use all the time, and I'll share it in this community now. And that is, a working king is a loved king. And I usually ungender it and talk about a working queen is a loved queen. And, and so for me, witnessing you, Chief Hill, and your wonderful colleague, Cynthia, is a way of looking at what a working king does. Because Norbert said, I'm bringing somebody with me if you're asking me to do anything. And so the way we've come to know you, Cynthia, is through the wonderful connection and accolades that Norbert has shared with me, and now I share with others about who you are. So we had a delightful conversation on the side of the road when Cynthia was driving through LA, and we were talking about, Cynthia, would you please honor us with your presence? Cynthia, is there things that I should know that would be important for the community to know? And so what I do know is that Cynthia is a professor, an executive coach, an author, an inspirational leader. Please read her bio in Padlet. I don't want to take up our time talking about words on a page. I'd rather you experience her. But the one thing that I love most in her bio is, again, connecting herself to the land. And so her name in her Cherokee family is Lion Mother, which she strives to live up to each and every day. And if we've ever seen a pride of lions and watched the mother, you know, you probably want to duck when Lion Mother shows up. And so without any further explanation, introduction, or accolade, I ask Cynthia, please come on.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. And first and foremost, I want to express my gratitude to NTL for giving us a seat at the table. And congratulations for 75 years of work. You are truly changing lives and making this world a better place. So in Cherokee, we say Wado, which means thank you. So I live in Los Angeles, and first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the first peoples of this land. So here in Los Angeles, the first people of the land are the Tongva, Gabrielinos. So wherever you are in the world, it's so important for you to know who the first people of your land are and acknowledge them. So first I have to say, I don't speak for all Native Americans. No one does. As Norbert said, there are over 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. But we know that there's many, many more tribes that are not federally recognized, and each tribe has its own uniqueness. Now, I am a Cherokee citizen. The Cherokees are the largest tribes in the United States. We have about 425,000 citizens spread throughout the United States. Our reservation is in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and we have gambling. So we're a very fortunate tribe. We have 10 casinos. So our annual budget for the tribe is over $1 billion. And I am happy to say that our tribal leadership has made a conscious decision to reinvest that money back into our community. So we have hospitals, we have schools. I'm proud to say that we're the first tribe to actually have a medical school. And we open up that medical school to other tribes. And we're going to be graduating our first class this year. So just a little side note. So we have had in our modern history, we have had one female chief of our nation, principal chief. Her name was Wilma Mankiller. And I'm happy to say that she's now on a quarter. It just came out that she's on a quarter, but she was an amazing, amazing leader that led for about 10 years from 1975 until 1985. And it was a woman that said, you know what, if gaming is going to come into our tribe, we have to make sure that that money comes back to our people, because some tribes that have gaming will partial out allotments of money to people. She says, you know, that's nice, but we really have to make sure that we're looking out for the greater good of our community. So all that money is reinvested into our community for community benefit. Now, I'm blessed to come from dual cultures. I'm Latina and Native American. I use the term Native American and Indigenous interchangeably. So today I'm going to talk about my Cherokee roots. Now, in Cherokee culture, first and foremost, we are taught to live in harmony and balance with the world. We have a perspective, and Norbert touched upon this, we have a perspective that we're connected to everything, past, present, and future. So we have a holistic view of the world. You know, my elders have taught me that we have 7 original laws. And the 7 original laws are, first and foremost, love yourself, right? Not in an egotistical way, but love yourself. And for me, that's what personal development is all about. And then the next 4, and then the next one actually is love me. And that means a creator. So I use the term creator. I can say the term God. I can say universal consciousness. To me, it's really having that understanding that there's something much bigger than all of us. Then the next 4 are the elements. Love the internal flame, which is fire. Love the earth. I mean, Mother Earth is so important in our culture. And we all know, I see that our audience is global. We all know that we only have one Earth. love air, and most importantly, love all mankind, because we know we are all connected. So those are some of our traditional values that we believe in. However, I'm sad to say that many of these teachings were stripped away from our culture. And we as Native Americans have experienced nothing less than genocide in this country. Now, most people don't, when they think of Native Americans, they don't think of genocide, but that's really what happened to us. Especially when it comes to our culture. In Oklahoma, where I said that our reservation is, it was actually illegal to participate in ceremony from the early 1900s until the 1970s. All that time, if you participated in ceremony, and for us, our ceremony is called stomp dance. If you participated in ceremony, people went to jail. So that there was a systematic way of eliminating our culture. Our children were stolen from their homes and sent to boarding schools and indoctrinated with other beliefs. There were relocation programs to separate us from our community. And that's how my family ended up in California. So understanding the historical trauma that Norbert talked about, you can see the impact of historical trauma on our behavior. Do you know that 50% of Native American women will be either sexually or physically abused? And unfortunately, much of that abuse comes from our own men. Today I wear red to support missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Murder is the third leading cause of death for Indigenous women. Indigenous women and girls are murdered at a rate 10 times higher than the rest of the population. Last year in the US, we saw national coverage of a case of Gabby Petito, and that was a non-Native woman that was unfortunately murdered by her boyfriend. So, but that got national coverage. Every day it was on the news for weeks, and they unfortunately found that she had perished. And I was a little bit disappointed. And again, my prayers go out to her and her family. But what it made me think of is, as of 2016, the National Crime Information Center reported there were 5,712 cases of missing and American Indigenous women and girls. And guess what? That didn't make the news. We didn't hear about any of that. So as a community, it's so important to heal, both as an individual and as collective. And as a result of the historical trauma that we have suffered, we have issues of alcohol and drug abuse, which I believe is a way of our coping mechanisms, how we deal with this historical trauma. Now, I know that this issues of alcohol and drug abuse are real. I personally have 3 brothers, and out of my 3 brothers, one brother ended up being a heroin addict, and 2 brothers ended up being alcoholics. Now, I'm happy to say one of my brothers has been in recovery for over 20 years, and he's thriving. So I personally have experience and seen what this historical trauma does in our community. As we continue to fight for social justice, I was so happy a few years ago, we saw the most recognized significant issue probably of my lifetime in the Native American community, which was Standing Rock. Well, I was happy, and even though it was a situation, an unfortunate situation that brought us together, for the first time in my lifetime, I saw over 100 tribes come together to really support around this issue. Now, when I think of my life, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I was able to get my master's degree by the time I was 23. I got my master's degree in counseling. My undergraduate was in psychology. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. Now, I have to admit that I am a PhD dropout. And what happened is by the time I was in my mid to late 20s, I was accepted to a PhD program in psychology. But as a woman, I had to make decisions. I was married, had a young toddler, and had just started my own business and was working 7 days a week. So as women, sometimes we have to make decisions, what's best for ourselves and for our family. So I made a decision to drop out of the PhD program and focus on my business and my family. Well, I have no regrets because I was able to build that business to $1 million a year business. And I have one son who is an adult now, and he's thriving. So in the Cherokee culture, women have always played an important role in our community. Yet today, I see so many women struggle with the issues of confidence and feeling not worthy. You know, we think that you can't, many people think that you can't be confident and humble at the same time, that they're mutually exclusive. Well, I'm here to say that you can have both. You can be humble and confident. But I also have seen that dynamic not just limited to Native Americans. I've seen it really cross over to many women. As was mentioned, I'm an executive coach. For the last 7 to 8 years, I've been doing executive coaching with primarily C-suite executives. And somehow organically, my business grew to 90% of my clients are women. And I have seen many women struggle. They get into these positions, high level positions, and then all of a sudden, all their insecurities come up and they feel like they don't belong. They feel like they shouldn't have that job. And so it's really important that as women, we really support each other. And I really invest a lot of time in making sure that women rise. I'm proud to say that the Los Angeles Business Journal recently gave me the 2022 award for Mentor of the Year, because I really feel committed to turn around and help women rise. And when I say I help women rise, it's not to diminish the men. It's because we've lived in the society where the men have dominated. And so when you help women rise, it's really about helping restore that balance. Now, the first night of this event, I heard Dr. Marianne Rainey talk about the importance of training leadership to our young people. And I couldn't agree more, because as Native Americans, as Cherokees, we're taught to always remember our ancestors and consider the future. I believe that every single person has the ability to be a leader. Now, in terms of leadership, we know that there's over 60,000 books written on leadership. The way I like to define leadership is the ability to influence others. And we all have the ability to influence others. If you're a parent, you influence others. If you're a coworker, you influence others. If you're, what I teach the young people, if you're on social media, you influence others. So I feel that we all, and in particular the youth, have the responsibility of making sure that they're using that influence in a positive way. During the pandemic, we all know that everything shut down. And so I asked myself, how can I be a beneficial presence? So I actually partnered with Cherokee Nation, and we did a Gen Z leadership program. So we know Gen Z is age 15 to 25. And I taught them leadership values. And I'm proud to say that we had over 3,600 young people, Gen Zers, participate in this program. But because they were Gen Z, I had to make sure that our each lesson was done in short increments. We were at 15 minutes, and then I allowed them to stay 15 minutes if they wanted to and ask questions. And they were so excited. They were so, so excited, and they participated. So that really warmed my heart and provided me with a lot of hope. So when I sit around the kitchen table or campfire, what do I talk about? I talk about, and Norbert talked about this, going back to the simplicity of my native roots and my native culture, so we can use that wisdom to cope in today's complicated world. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for listening. I really, really, appreciate being here. Wado.
Wanda. Cynthia?
Yes, dear. Yes, my queen.
You and Norbert are not finished yet.
I'm here. Whatever you need. I'm here to be of service.
Thank you, my sister. We are going to take a few minutes for questions and statements. I'm going to ask, as we've asked before, if you raise your hands in the queue, and remember the 20-second delay, so don't panic. But are there questions, comments, blinding flashes of the obvious, praise for the presenters? The floor is open. Michael Brazel? Now tap unmute.
Okay, I think I'm on. Chief Hill and Cynthia Ruiz, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well.
I was really, I was struck by your conversation, struck by your points, and what it brought up for me was my own unconsciousness about, as a white man who has benefited from the settler colonialism that's happened in this country. And the realization, I come from Irish immigrants. Brazel is an Irish name. And the Brazel farm was a 100-acre land grant in Purcell, Kansas, in northeast Kansas. I visited there 15 years ago and discovered something that has never been talked about in my family, that Purcell, Kansas is surrounded by indigenous reservations. That's where the people that were on the Brazel farm and surrounding farms ended up. I also want to mention that I am a graduate of a land grant university, and we've got a land grant university system in this country that was formed and created by separating indigenous people from their homes and from their land and sticking them into small parcels called reservations. So thanks so much for bringing up some aspects of myself that I was unconscious about.
Thank you so much. And, the reason I share this information is all we are looking for, and the first step of healing, right, is acknowledgement. You don't have to feel guilty, but acknowledging what happened, because unfortunately nowadays in schools, they don't teach our history. They don't teach what happened. And we use the term genocide and people are like shocked. But so thank you so much for just the acknowledgement.
Yes, sometimes people forget that they have amnesia about being beneficiaries to the everything that was taken from Indian people, and the acknowledgement is so important. I also think about songs in Indian country that include the voices of Indian women and Indian men. And if it's just only men, they say the eagle can't fly with one wing. So to maintain our balance, we need the voices of both, and the eagle can fly, and that we're trying to find our voices through those songs.
So Norbert, thank you for being my balance today. The eagle could fly.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yes, the pride is complete. Argentine?
Mhm. Good morning. Good morning, Chief and Sister Cynthia. You have raised up my ancestors. Only recently, well, not recently, at the year 2000, when my family lost its ancestors, that I realized that I am a combination of Cherokee on my mother's side and Seminole on my father's side, which goes back about 4 generations. And so that when the Smithsonian created, and I'm sure, Norbert, you had something to do with it,
He was the chair.
the National Museum of the American Indian, I became a charter member.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you did to bringing that about. And this was in 2005 when I was working on international projects with NTL. So that my world became the foundation for the work that I was doing was grounded in the native land where we were born. And so when I got the opportunity to be part of this museum, and I've been there several times visiting and eating in that wonderful restaurant that you have there, I am enlivened and inspired to continue to do the work of bringing us all together on this planet, all peoples, all people. So I thank you for the work that you did and allowing me to be part of that development.
Thank you for not forgetting who you are and
No.
celebrating the museum like all the rest of us. It's a national showcase.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And thank you for being here to celebrate with us the NTL 75 years. Yes.
Thank you, sister.
Yeah.
I want the record to show that Norbert was the chair of the committee that built the museum. That humbleness of that. And I want to remind us that that Native American Museum is the first immersive museum on the mall. So the yesterday, today, and tomorrow of Native culture lives in that museum.
That's right.
So I thank you again. And I just wanted that into our recording and for the people on the YouTube to know, because maybe we didn't hear it. Thank you, Argentine.
You're welcome.
Elena.
Let me share a quick story about the museum. I was at a meeting when I first joined the museum. I was sitting next to David Rockefeller, and he pulled out his personal checkbook and he wrote a check out for $250,000 and folded it in half. And just as a real humble man, he says, "Would you pass this to the front?" And we were able to celebrate a thing we were trying to do. But it was nice to have allies like David Rockefeller.
Yes. Elena.
Yeah, I just wanted to put my voice in. I appreciate what Argentine just said. I thank the planning committee for having the two of you on this platform. Often as recently getting a DNA study, finding out I'm 44% Native American, and in particular from California, the Yelkut tribe, Mexican American. So I really resonated with you, Cynthia, with regard to having that Latinx and Native American heritage. I often feel alone. And in this moment, I don't feel alone. So I thank you for being here. Thank you.
Well, you're never alone. The ancestors got your back, girl. So you're never alone.
I appreciate that.
Mm. Dave, we're going to let you. Thank you, Elena. I'm sorry. I'm watching three things: the clock, the hands, and our next presenter. Dave, you have the last word for this round.
Well, I'm thinking of our presence, and in our presence right now in this country, the counterforces to everything we stand for are fully at work. And as a teacher, feeling the pain of every sort of teacher in this country right now, thinking of the cancellation and the ways that our Native friends and relatives were treated, it's happening again.
Mhm.
And it's the attack point is on the teacher and what we can and cannot say about the past or even the future. And it's cropping up all over. So we do have some work. And if we want to put one point on the map where you can be very helpful, recognize we have teachers who are now quitting out of exhaustion, and many are being thrown out of their teaching jobs because of what they have said instead of who they are. And this is going on, folks. So while I have wonderful, warm feelings from everything we've experienced in the last now 3 days, I'm feeling teachers, I'm feeling the pain, and we have some folks to help.
Mm,
Thank you. Yeah.
thank you. It's my honor to close this block around Norbert and Cynthia and turn this over to Carl